wanted to talk to you about that I'm really excited about is talking about food issues.
Okay.
And we know that there is a wide range of spectrum, again, of food issues, everything from a picky eater to children who literally it's life and death. We have a fear of failure to thrive. Let's start with on the really panicked end. If you feel, because a lot of parents say, I don't want to mess with my child's diet, I don't want to argue with them because I'm afraid that they're going to starve and they're not going to eat. But it's a different issue for a child who really has failure to thrive, yes?
Okay, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what kinds of things you would see in a child who has failure to thrive and what you need to do if that's really the case.
So they typically get diagnosed with failure to thrive by their pediatrician if they are extremely underweight and not growing at the right speeds. And it also has to do with the fact that there's not significant change in those variables. So it's not just that they're really underweight or they're really short, but there's also not seeming to be a growth pattern that's occurring.
Okay. Because kids grow in different ways and at different times, and kids are going to weigh different amounts. But if a child is sort of stuck on one area that you're
you're not seeing very much change when they should be gaining weight steadily and growing taller steadily.
Okay. So if you're at home and you're seeing that on your own and the pediatrician hasn't diagnosed it yet, that's when you need to be concerned, right? You need to get to the pediatrician and say, I'm concerned about this.
Yeah, and they'll do an exam and they have charts that they use and things like that. And if it's something that they're concerned with, then they'll usually start to make some recommendations for that. Now, part of the recommendations might involve having your child receive some sort of intervention, which even we provide at CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, through our SOS program, which is specialized outpatient services. And this is where it'll be an intensive treatment where we'll spend, a few weeks very intensively, many meals a day, trying to get the child to eat using scientifically proven techniques.
Yeah.
So we usually say make sure you see a expert when you're trying to treat it.
Absolutely.
And also make sure you have gone to the physicians and you have gotten lots of tests done to make sure that your child is capable of eating. You don't want certain medical issues to come into play if you go straight into trying to treat the problem.
Because sometimes it could be something that's actually physiologically happening that you got to treat before you can even go after it behaviorally, right?
So it could be things like the child has a swallowing disorder.
Right.
Perhaps when they swallow things, even they could aspirate, which means the food would get into their lungs, which then later leads to things like pneumonia. So you don't want to just start moving forward on certain issues, or maybe they have some sort of gastrointestinal issues or GI reflux, and oftentimes the child might be even experiencing pain from some of these things, and they're not capable of actually telling you that.
Right.
So then you're sitting there trying to get them to eat stuff, and it's just making them feel worse.
Right, and we don't want to do that ever. So if you're really concerned and your child isn't making that progress, there's a couple of steps that you got to do, figure things out before you can even, but there's hope always, right?
Yes.
We've seen lots of kids who have failure to thrive, and yet, once they go through some different, identify that there isn't a medical issue, then there are techniques that can be used to help those, but it's not something that a parent should do on their own. Is that what you're saying?
At what point?
If they've identified that it's failure to thrive and they've shown that it's not a medical issue, you were saying some interventions that are over a long period of time, but we shouldn't try to do that by ourselves.
Well, I would say if it's going to get to the point where you have to get into some intrusive interventions, you shouldn't do it by yourself.
Okay.
And you shouldn't hang out waiting to try some kind of non-intrusive interventions for several months while the child's then not growing and making any gains. So if you want to try a couple things based on recommendations, and you don't see immediate results, I would say then you need to get help right away. So don't let it drag on. Okay,
good to know. But for a lot of us, our child doesn't have failure to thrive, but might be picky, finicky eaters.
Yeah.
And this is a whole other spectrum because there's all different kinds of things that, and I think that as a parent, it's hilarious when it's somebody else's child and they're finicky about something. Somebody will say, oh, well, they only eat this color or they only eat this texture, and it's ha ha. But when it's at our own kid, there's nothing funny about it, right? It's really one of those things that you stress about, and it makes it hard if you're going to go someplace to eat. You're always having to pack food. It's a miserable existence, and you're still worrying about your child and that are they getting enough nutrition?
Yeah.
I know parents will say, well, my child only eats white things, or they only eat brown things. Or, what we hear a lot is that they want to subsist completely on chicken McNuggets and French fries.
I've had those kids where I had a family who said every single day they run by McDonald's and they pick up this, meal that you just described. But the truth is I said, well, have you even tried using like Tyson brand nuggets? And they say, yeah, my kid won't eat them. Like they can tell the brands.
Yep.
Even if you put it in a McDonald's box,
right.
Like they can just tell, and they won't eat it.
Right, different things. And then there are the kids who do the mac and cheese. I mean, they have these things and it's tough for the parents. It's really tough. So, and a lot of parents say, but I don't know what to do. And there's I think a belief that there is nothing that can be done. I think that's one of the biggest things. Are there things that you can do for those finicky eaters to make it different?
Well, even in the very beginning, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they feed their child a meal and the child doesn't eat it, and then they just decide, okay, my child doesn't like that food, and they don't ever present it again. That's problematic because even speaking from experience with my own daughter, who's 3 years old, I consider her a picky eater. I present food to her, and she will always tell me she doesn't like it.
So she just has an automatic no stance that she does on all food. That's so interesting.
Yes. And oftentimes I can use, reinforcement to get her to eat it. So it's something like, well, if you try a few bites of it, then I'm going to let you have this other food that you really want.
Okay. But you got to follow through with that.
Yeah. And then I don't give her that food if she doesn't eat it, right?
Right.
And I can almost always get her to try new foods that way.
Wow. Okay.
Almost always. And then she'll still tell me she doesn't like it or whatever, and I'll say, that's fine, you just have to try it. But guess what I do on the next meal and the next meal after that? I cook for the family.
Right.
I don't become a short order cook and make this for this person and that for that person. I have something I'm going to make. That's what dinner is. I present it. And if she already told me 5 other times she didn't like it, I don't care. I put a little bit of every single item back on the plate because even there's some research out there showing that just representing food actually leads to people beginning to eat it.
That's really interesting because I think, there's that part of our mommy brains where we go, oh, I just don't want to go there.
Check out this really cool thing that one of my friends, another behavior analyst, she did this as a treatment for one of her kids, and it totally worked. She literally took little bowls and placed them all over the therapy room because she provides comprehensive ABA to teach all sorts of skills and stuff like that too, but it just so happened this child also doesn't eat much. Okay. And she just put bowls of foods that the child would not touch with, no matter what, and just put them all over the room. And at first, like even just looking at them, he might gag and things like that. He definitely wasn't going to go near them. But as like days and weeks progressed, he got curious. He started like looking at them. He started touching them. He started picking them up. He started smelling them. He eventually started eating some of them.
Wow. So it's sort of like systematic desensitization, that it was
like
there
that.
And there was no demand put on the child, that, he saw that it wasn't the worst frightening thing in the world, I'm guessing.
And at one point, maybe he just got curious or something. And if you think about it, isn't food really reinforcing?
It is. Well,
don't we love it?
Well, we can tell that I do.
So the best, to me, what's so great about feeding is that it's actually like a super fast behavior change. Getting a child who's not eating something to getting them to eating something, once you get going on it, it happens like overnight. It's really, really fast because oftentimes the foods that we end up getting them to eat, if we're smart and we pick good ones, they actually like them.
Yeah.
Like they taste good. And guess what? It's automatically reinforcing to eat that food. Now you don't really need...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You don't have to do a whole lot of
But sometimes it's still gross to them and they're gagging and stuff like that, and you just keep doing it and you keep presenting other reinforcers, and eventually they do develop tastes for things, as we know. Even our tastes change. I know mine have. Even as an adult, I'll eat things I wouldn't have eaten before.
Right. What do we do? What is our reaction when they're gagging? Because I think this is a big pitfall too. When they're gagging, we want to react, right? We want to say, stop that. knock that off. That's not necessary. But is that what we should be doing?
No.
Okay.
We need to not attend to it because we can easily shape up the behavior and increase it if they like that attention that they end up getting for that.
Or if we find it funny.
Or, yeah, if we're laughing, or if we, say, oh my gosh, if the gagging freaks you out, so then you end the meal.
Right.
Then you're going to allow the child to escape. So then they're just going to actually start. It sounds weird because it's like gagging seems like a physiological thing, but we actually could consider that a learned behavior like anything else. And they can start to just do it. And they can even do that with vomiting.
Oof, yeah. I have a friend whose child, anytime you present food that he doesn't want, he just spontaneously pukes.
And you would think it's spontaneous and that it's just like something physiological, but actually like it's a learned behavior that they can just on command like make themselves vomit.
Yeah, and
if
she
you
can
go,
tell you.
And you remove the food, then guess what? They're going to do it next time too, and the time after that, and you're never going to get anywhere.
And she will tell you that is what has happened, that as soon as he throws up, she removes the food, and he's learned really well that works. I'll throw up and it's over. Okay, so we have to keep ourselves kind of neutral.
Yeah, just don't attend to it.
Okay.
Yeah, just act like it's not happening. Sometimes I swear to you, I wish I could just wear earplugs at certain moments because then I'd be a better parent.
Yeah, wouldn't we all be better parents if we could do that? No, because it's hard sometimes.
Because when they're, carrying on and screaming and yelling, and I go through it too all the time with my kids, and I go to that phase where I'm just like, don't attend to this. It's all something they're doing for attention right now, and wait for the positive behavior and give attention then. I'm like, I have to coach myself still because it's so emotional. And it's so hard when it's your own kids. And as a behavior analyst, it's so easy for me to tell other people that you should do it a certain way, or
but the reality
and it's even easy for me to do that with someone else's child. But when it comes to your own child, I know as being a parent, it's really hard to be consistent.
Yeah, because you got all these other things going on too. But when you say don't attend to it, for people who are new to ABA, what do you mean by don't attend to it?
Don't talk about it. Don't even look at the child when they're doing it. Act like you don't even notice and be
busy with your own stuff.
Be busy.
Yeah.
And keep doing what you're doing.
But we're not talking about completely ignore the child.
No, I'm just saying you don't change what you're doing because they're gagging.
It doesn't
like if it's a meal time and you present a meal and the focus right now is on getting the food down and eating it, then we continue doing that. We don't change the conditions just because they start gagging.
Okay, really important. Yeah, talk a little bit, because we just showed our food clip and we were sneaking vegetables into meatloaf and things like that. And but talk to us a little bit about when it's textures and things like that, or a new flavor that we want to introduce, about how we might potentially sneak things into something in order to grow the ability to be able to handle it.
So what you did in the video was really good. It's basically the idea of just blending things together. So you can take two foods, mix them together, and the child might not even realize that food's in there, which is kind of the case of what you guys were getting at, right? Didn't you put like vegetables and meatloaf?
Oh, we put crazy amounts of vegetables.
Mashed potatoes, had spinach, and things like that.
Obviously, with the mashed potatoes, it was evident because it turned them green.
But that was exciting and cool because it was St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah, and I don't think you really can taste the mashed potato in the mashed potatoes. I don't think you really taste it takes the smallest amount of spinach to turn them green.
Right, right.
I love spinach, so it's hard for me to say, but I don't think it changes the flavor much.
I think that's a really easy way to get foods in, but I don't think that should be a long-term plan, because think about it, isn't it a lot of work to sneak food into other food?
I would have had to put eggs and breadcrumbs in anyway into meatloaf, and instead I put the vegetables, and my son likes to grind them.
Okay.
So for me,
if it's not a lot of work, why not, right?
Right.
But we also want to get the kids to eat these foods.
Yes.
But anyways, you can blend things together, and you can start off with even 10% of the non-preferred food mixed with 90% of the preferred food, just so they can't have any clue it's in there, and then slowly increase it, and actually they won't typically notice. Like that's how I remember my son, after I was done nursing him, he started doing formula, and then I had to move from formula to milk.
Ah.
He did not like milk.
Oh, interesting.
And so that jump from formula to milk was really hard. So the only way I could get him to drink milk was by mixing it with the formula, and I would do like 90-10, and then I would slowly increase it, and then I kind of like faded the formula out, so then it was eventually all milk. Well, this is actually a procedure that we use all the time in feeding.
Right.
For all sorts of things, like believe it or not, a lot of kids are refusing liquids.
Yeah.
So you just mix the two things together and slowly fade out the one that shouldn't be there.
Right, and the same thing with textures, right? It's all about baby steps. Don't try to accomplish something big in one day, but take a period of time and change textures.
Yeah.
Right?
So with textures, I had, for example, a boy who was eating jarred puree baby food, and he was like 4 years old, and he would have to have multiple of these big jars because he's a big kid already.
Yeah.
You know, he's 4 at every meal. And essentially, we did a little assessment and figured out he really would not eat anything above that texture. So we started mixing that texture with another texture, which was a bump up.
But a slight bump, right?
Yeah, it looks like a kind of like a soupy oatmeal texture. And we mixed that with like 90% of the puree, and then we slowly started bumping it up, and then we got into more of like a ground looking texture, and then from ground we got into chopped fine, which is like little tiny little pieces if you were to chop like an onion up, mince it or something like that. And then we started, and so now it's at the size of real food. It's not even blended anymore, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
And we started increasing the size until it looked like a normal, you know, size of a
And
nickel
so that
or a
child
quarter or
started
something.
eating typically then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to move forward, and if the child's not ready for it, you'll know because they'll be
They'll refuse.
giving you a rough time, then you back up. So you don't want to move too fast forward because sometimes kids won't go for it. But you can probe forward to see are they ready yet, and if they're not, then go back and then slowly go again. And by probe, we just mean test ahead kind of a thing.
What do
So
you
it's
do
like
for
a forward-back movement, you know, until you get to where you need to be.
Okay. What do you do for colors?
You know what? I haven't personally had to deal with that, but I would think it could be a similar kind of thing.
Okay.
You know, like
Small amount of just slightly change the color and do it a little bit at a time. I also think too, probably if you made it reinforcing enough to eat something that was a different color, that might potentially, depending on the child.
yeah,
Because it all comes down to being reinforcing, right?
yeah.
And there are ways that we can do it in a different format, in a different way. My son wouldn't eat things that were cold. He just doesn't like things that are cold.
Yeah.
Until we decided to make our own popsicles, and he got to decide what went in them, what fruit went in them, and then suddenly he liked cold things.
Yeah.
I had to make it reinforcing enough for him.
So we were just kind of talking about fading procedures, right? But also, in general, when kids don't like something that's cold, or they don't like a certain color, or they don't like just a certain food, then there's other things we can use, like differential reinforcement, where we provide a reinforcer if they try it, or demand fading, which is where you say you only have to have one bite, and then you get this massive thing that you really like, you know?
Okay.
And then as they have one bite, then we increase that to now you have to have 2 bites or 3 bites or whatever.
Okay.
And because the food usually tastes really good and it's reinforcing to them after a while, or they develop a taste for it, you eventually can just bump right up to normal amounts. It's not like you have to introduce one new bite every time.
Okay.
You know?
But we want to minimize the battle too. We don't want to be sitting there and put, the big plate of something on there and say you're not going to get up from the table until you eat the whole thing. That's not a place to start. Not going to be successful, right?
I wouldn't say to do that for a parent, just because I know how hard it is, and also if you can't follow through, that's reinforcing the problem behavior.
Yeah.
So you want to put something you actually can follow through with.
Okay. Really important.
And don't stress yourself out and make yourself do so much all at once.
Yeah, because we're so busy doing that with everything else, right? And the food, I don't know, there's an emotional thing with the food always. It's an emotional time. It's a time, usually when you sit down to do dinner, that's an emotional time of the day. And, especially if you've cooked the meal, you want everybody to enjoy it. It can be power-packed.
But one thing I want to mention, too, is that some of these things are just not going to work.
Okay. Good to know.
And if that happens, then we have to go to more intrusive procedures, and this is where you're going to want someone from CARD SOS or someone with a feeding background who's a behavior analyst at BCBA.
Okay, so try these things. If you have success, great. Be patient with it.
Be patient, but if your child's failure to thrive, don't waste a lot of time.
No
Just get straight into the expert if you need to.
Okay, but finicky eater, we can be a little patient.
Yeah.
Okay.